Hi everyone, it's Emmanuel Kadosh. I wanted to invite you all to subscribe to ILTV Plus, where you can find our daily news and updates about Israel. And not only that, but live feeds, entertainment, our kosher food show, and so much more. Needless to say, your subscription to ILTV Plus helps us grow and create more content while also supporting the state of Israel. Our app is available on all platforms and devices, so I'll see you guys there.
Hello and welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Aaron Porras, and coming up in today's newscast, the IDF defending against another attempted drone attack from Lebanon, while Israel accused of sending UAVs into Syria. Meanwhile, the battle over religious rights at the Western Wall turning uglier and uglier. Ultra-Orthodox youths blowing their noses with pages torn out from a more liberal Jew's prayer book. Then later, TikTok stars and influencers taking the tour of a lifetime and getting a first-hand look from deep within the belly of the northern Hezbollah terror tunnels. It seems that the 3 Hezbollah drones intercepted by Israel over the Mediterranean Sea last weekend are not the only attempted attack by the Lebanese-Iranian proxy terror group. And the IDF now publicizing that, in fact, this was the second such attempted attack in a few days' time. Israeli army officials revealing that just 3 days prior to an attempted Hezbollah drone attack last Saturday, the IDF intercepting another Hezbollah UAV en route to the Israeli Karish offshore gas field. And Hezbollah later confirming that they launched the drone following threats to do just that. The IDF saying, though, that none of the 4 unmanned vehicles were allowed to pose a threat, adding that the previously unpublished downing occurring over Lebanese airspace and far from the Israeli maritime border. Meanwhile, during his visit with French President Macron in Paris, Israeli Prime Minister Yair Lapid outlining the threats posed against Israel from Iran and its various proxies like Hezbollah, and adding that Israel will not sit idly by as they continue.
These UAVs were sent by Hezbollah, a terrorist organization that threatens Lebanon's stability, violates its sovereignty, pushes it towards a dangerous escalation with Israel, and harms the national interests of Lebanon, a country I know is dear to your heart. Hezbollah has more than 100,000 rockets in Lebanon aimed at Israel. It tries to attack us with Iranian rockets and UAVs. Israel will not sit back and do nothing given these repeated attacks.
So to that end, Israel blamed for a drone strike of its own. Lebanese and Syrian media accusing an Israeli UAV of striking near the border village of Hadar overnight Wednesday, resulting in the death of a 46-year-old Syrian soldier. And the reports going on to say that the soldier was a prominent figure in the Assad regime who had close ties to terror group Hezbollah and regularly conducted military operations with Syrian soldiers as well as the National Defense Forces militia. Moving on, Israel police on Wednesday arresting a Palestinian man suspected of stabbing an Israeli ultra-Orthodox Jew Tuesday morning. I got to the emergency room in the hospital and there's no way to describe what I saw, says Yael, wife to the 47-year-old victim, Itzhak Dahan. Yael adding, it was really horrible. He was completely covered in blood. The attack occurring around 5 a.m. Tuesday as Dahan was on his way to synagogue for morning prayers. Dahan explaining that he boarded a pedestrian bridge over Route 4 between Bnei Brak and Givat Shmuel, where he saw a man approaching from the opposite direction. The suspect then placed his hand in his bag but didn't remove anything until after he passed by, at which time he removed a weapon and hit Dahan over the head 2 to 3 times. And Dahan suffering multiple serious fractures to his head by what is suspected to have been a knife, though it may have also been a hammer or small axe. In any case, Dahan now recovering and in stable condition at hospital. The suspect, meantime, captured following a more than a day-long manhunt and transferred to the Shin Bet for interrogation. Now, last week, Thursday, a shocking display as families from the United States came to celebrate a bar mitzvah at the Western Wall, or Kotel. Several dozen Orthodox Israeli men and youths entered the area with whistles and signs, called the visitors Nazis and animals, and at one point ripped out pages from a prayer book with which one protester wiped his nose. International Jewish groups therefore renewing calls for serious action to be taken to uphold the freedom of prayer for all denominations. And joining me with more is Vice Chair of the Women of the Wall organization, Tammy Gottlieb. Tammy, it's great to have you back with us. Thank you so much. Now, can you give us some context for what preceded this disruption?
So we, Women of the Wall, had our Rosh Chodesh prayer. We meet once a month to pray in the women's section of the Kotel. And we were there, and it was violent as it is in the past few months. There are always people there protesting against us and pushing the limits of violence in the women's section of the Western Wall and in the platform in the northern Western Wall. Not only that, the Western Wall Heritage Fund bought their bullies to stand there and not let us in properly. And while Women of the Wall were having their prayer, it was as violent as it is every month in the past few months. The footage that we're looking at right now was taken by me something like half an hour after the Women of the Wall prayer. We finished our prayer and we left the Kotel, the northern Kotel, the women's section. And as we were leaving, my day job boss, I am also the associate director of the Masorti conservative movement in Israel. She called and she said, there are things going on in the egalitarian Kotel, which the conservative movement in Israel takes care of. So I ran there. And I got there, and there were about 50 young Haredi boys, as you can see in the photos, disturbing something like 5 different ceremonies going on at the same time in the egalitarian Kotel, which always has bar and bat mitzvah ceremonies. Again, this is what we can see now in the footage. They were there with whistles, basically standing next to the ceremonies and whistling into the ears of the families that were praying there.
So Tammy, I have to.
There were few families, not all from the United States.
So Tammy,
there were few that did come from the United States, right, and some Israeli families.
How long did it take for police to get there? Because as you said, that this is a regular, premeditated protest, and as you are saying that it often becomes physical. So how long did it take for police to get involved?
When I got to the egalitarian Kotel, I think a few minutes after me, maybe 5 minutes after me, the police came, which means that it was 15 minutes after the issues began. That being said, the police strategy was that they're not removing anyone until the point of physical violence. So the whistles wasn't considered physical violence.
Well, doesn't theft of the prayer book and destruction of property, constitute a reason to get involved?
So the ripping of the prayer book happened towards the end. The policemen and women that were there didn't see the attack happening, didn't see the ripping happening. I did file a complaint. I'm waiting for that. We'll see if something happens in that aspect. As you can see, the boy ripping the prayer book is a minor. So we don't know what will happen with that. The guy blowing his nose with the prayer book is not a minor, so maybe something will happen with that. But the police, basically, I want to say, up to the ripping of the prayer book, it was violent nevertheless. Okay, the whistles in people's ears, you can see the sun blockers there. They brought them down without noticing that people are standing underneath. It was a very, very violent situation. The idea, the concept for the police to have that violence is only when someone actually pushes me or touches me, that's something that needs to change.
Well, so I want to get into that. Interim Prime Minister Lapid and many other authorities after this incident denounced it and the so-called protesters' actions. But in a letter to Lapid written by a number of Jewish federations, words of support are not enough. What concrete actions are you calling for, and what reason do you have to hope that they'll happen anytime soon?
First of all, I want to say that Prime Minister Lapid's words are very important. It's important that the Prime Minister sees the situation and decides to talk about what's going on. It's a big thing. That being said, the police has to know that our safety needs to be put in an important place. And up to now, it seems as if they're disregarding our safety. And I think that's something that Prime Minister Lapid can do. He can say violence is not only when someone is pushed or kicked, right, or I don't know, there are different kinds of violence and people should be prosecuted and pay the price.
Tammy, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
United States Secretary of State Antony Blinken phoning new interim Israeli Prime Minister Yair Lapid on Wednesday, and the call being the first public communication between the two since Lapid becoming caretaker premier last week. In a positive start to their relationship, U.S. Secretary of State Blinken congratulating Israeli Prime Minister Yair Lapid on his new position, as well as reiterating the White House's, quote, unwavering commitment to the U.S.-Israel partnership, Israel's security, and to countering shared threats, including those from Iran. Additionally, Blinken repeating emphasis on the U.S.'s support for a negotiated two-state solution between Israel and the Palestinians, a plan that, in principle, Lapid likewise backs. In fact, in 2019, Lapid laying out his vision for a solution including separation from the Palestinians, albeit while Israel retaining security control over the Jordan Valley and Judea and Samaria. Further, Jerusalem would not be divided, and Palestinians would not be entitled to Israeli citizenship. But even while Lapid seemingly willing to negotiate on these grounds, even telling Blinken on Tuesday that he would not rule out a meeting with PA President Abbas, Lapid qualifying that there are no immediate plans to do so, and that anyway, there are limits to what can be done given the current Palestinian leadership and Israel's political unrest. Still, these topics and more on the docket for the U.S.'s upcoming visit next week, U.S. President Biden and his delegation coming to Israel for Biden's first official trip to the region since taking office. His 3-day tour scheduled to set down in Israel, the West Bank, and Saudi Arabia. Now, a lot of attention has been paid to how terror group Hezbollah, like Hamas, has spent tens of millions of dollars on constructing cross-border tunnels in order to attack Israel. But not enough attention. That's why Israel is inviting a number of popular social media influencers, including Israeli stars, to see the tunnels firsthand and spread the word. Take a look.
I am in the Hezbollah tunnels right now, and as you can see, they spent all this money on terror and trying to kill us. They spent millions and millions and millions of dollars on just trying to kill Israelis, innocent Israelis as well. And when they could be really spending on their citizens on healthcare and welfare and education, but instead they just spend it on terror and trying to kill us, but they'll never get us.
Joining me now with more is influencer and South African Israeli TikTok star with 3.5 million followers, Daniel Braun. Daniel, it's great to meet you. Thank you so much for coming.
Great to meet you too. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's all ours. So, first of all, walk us through a little bit about what you saw in the tunnels. Like, what was that experience like?
It's crazy. It was absolutely insane to go in there and see with my own eyes the terror and the horror that the Hezbollah group built in order to attack us, in order to attack Israelis under citizens' houses, just exactly right under their houses. It was insane. And when I went under, I asked the IDF soldier, I asked him, did you guys add the metal on the sides and all the wiring?
And the electricals and
all the electricals and the lights and everything. He said, no. He said it was all Hezbollah and everything that you see, they built. And it was insane.
So this is, going off of some of the other content that you make, this is a turn for the much more serious and the political. It's a big jump from what you would normally post. How did you react to the response or the request for you to do this?
It didn't really come out of a request, to be honest. It came during the war.
Right.
I started posting out of my own
During the war last year?
Yeah, last year.
Okay.
Out of my own will, because this is our country, this is my country, and I love my country. And I don't want to listen to all the fake news that's being spread around in America and overseas, and all what Bella Hadid posts and all of that.
Right.
So I said, no, I have power. I have as much power as I have 3.5 million followers.
That's something.
It's something.
Yeah.
And I use that in order to spread the real news and what's actually going on here. And
So, you mentioned, of course, some of the fake news and some of the people who have attacked Israel online and on social media. Did you get angry responses? What kind of commentary, blowback did you get?
So much. Probably during the war, I lost 200,000 followers.
Really?
Probably even more. Probably like,
Was that before or after you posted stuff about Israel?
Oh, after I posted, of course, after. I get comments all the time, death threats. I get death threats about my family, about me. I get all different types of things, but at the end of the day, it's all open threats. They're not actually going to do anything. And I personally don't really care. But yeah, I still carry on posting.
I mean, do you have like examples of, what's like the worst or most credible, if there ever was a credible threat?
There wasn't really a credible threat, but I'm going to come to your house and kill you and your family, and all these terrible, terrible things that people say. But at the end of the day, they're all open threats. They're not going to do anything, I personally believe.
All right. Now, I know that you're currently active duty in the IDF, and so I know that there's a limit to what I can ask you, but how aware is the IDF to your situation and to this environment that you're in now?
I don't really include the army into what I do. I keep it more like I'm a citizen type of thing, and then I show my point of view of Israel and what's going on here on the land. Because when they get information from all these people overseas, they don't really see exactly what's happening here. And I'm on the ground, I'm on the land, and they can see from a first-person point of view what's actually going on. And that's what I like to show.
Now, you also mentioned that you kind of took a little bit more of a political tone during the conflict, and then of course now with this tour of the tunnels. Do you see yourself increasingly leveraging your followers and your following and your position to make that sort of content? Or I'm
working with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
Oh wow!
And they're helping me a lot with content. They took us on this trip. They organized it and everything. And I'm looking to carry on, of course, because this won't stop. This won't just end.
Right.
And they'll keep posting their fake news. And there always has to be someone that backs up Israel. And I like to be that person.
Did you have? I mean, how many?
Along with all the other influencers that
I was just going to ask, how many other people were down in the tunnel?
We must have been about 12 people, 12 influencers.
Wow.
Altogether, we had about 40 million followers.
Wow.
Which is a ton. And
sure.
Everyone posting their message and showing the world what's actually going on here in Israel. It's amazing. It's an amazing thing we've put together and been able to become.
So again, what was maybe the craziest thing that you saw or that you learned about these tunnels? Aside from their heavy infrastructure.
I think they went down about 50 to 100 meters down underground, which is deep.
Because it's rocky up in the north.
I think they only took us like an eighth down.
So you spent like the whole time just
we were just going down, descending, and then the way back up was a long way up. It was a long way up.
They didn't
my legs at the end, I came out like panting. It was so long down.
Oh my gosh!
But these tunnels are deep.
Can you like breathe down there? Is that
you can breathe, but there's no phone signal. But
so you have to take the pre-record the video.
Yeah, exactly. Got to pre-record. Can't post anything down there.
All right. Well, Daniel, it's an absolute pleasure to have you.
Thank you for having me.
For joining us.
Thank you.
All right, now the 50th annual conference of the Israel Society of Ecology and Environmental Studies kicking off Wednesday in Tel Aviv. And among the biggest surprises announced at the summit, Israel is now set to host the newest branch of the Jane Goodall Institute. And ILTV's Kayla Eberlin is reporting.
World-renowned primatologist, environmental activist, and UN peace messenger Dame Jane Goodall addressing Tel Aviv by video link on Wednesday and announcing that the newest branch of her famed Jane Goodall Institute soon coming to Israel, and the branch to be based at Max Stern Jezreel Valley College in northern Israel, where one of Goodall's longtime colleagues and friends, Dr. Itai Rothman, is a teacher and researcher. Additionally, Rothman himself is an evolutionary anthropologist and environmental activist with a long history of conservation work in Israel. Now, as for the new institute, Israel will be the 26th branch around the globe and will work with local populations, municipalities, community centers, schools, and other institutions to accomplish its goals. Goals including setting aside land for wild animal corridors, which facilitate their free movement between protected areas. Additionally, there are plans to restore Israeli wetlands and other ecosystems that have been dried up and converted for industry, agriculture, and construction. And as part of this plan, the Institute will replant native flora, fauna, and medicinal plants that have long since disappeared from the region or have become endangered. And by the region, Rothman and Goodall not only referring to Israel, but to Jordan, Egypt, and even all the way to the United Arab Emirates.
Now, for those who want to truly speak with the locals here in Israel, it's not enough to study from a book. You also need to learn the language of the street. But how do you efficiently go about doing that? Joining me to discuss the CEOs and co-founders of Ulpan Or, Yoel and Orly Ganor. Thank you both so much for coming in again.
Good afternoon.
Great to see you. So, okay, first of all, how much of a focus is there from the student's perspective on learning some of the slang? Because I'm guessing Google Translate doesn't cut it.
Right. Let's take, for instance, the English expression break a leg, right? If you go
Right.
to Google, what will you understand from that? You will not be able to understand that it's actually a blessing for good luck, right?
Right.
The same in
there's
Hebrew,
context here.
okay? So if you don't know that and you come to Israel and speak with the natives, you won't understand them unless you know some basic slang, some very common basic expressions.
And the focus is on expressions, because if you know those expressions, your life will be easier. People will smile to you because they'll understand you.
You'll achieve rapport with the Israelis. That's the thing.
So, okay, so what are some of like the tips and the tricks of going about picking up some of these expressions?
So the best trick is to actually hear it in a conversation. And that's what we're doing in our system. From the first minute, you study a little dialogue and you feel the way to use the word. And for instance,
Right.
we want to give you some examples. There is the word in Hebrew, sababa. And sababa actually means everything. Sababa is cool.
Yeah.
Sababa is okay. Sababa is, I'll do what you want.
It's a catch-all, oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Right?
The same goes for akhla, for instance.
Yeah, right.
Okay, the origin of those is, of course, Arabic,
Yeah,
but it's
for both,
very
yeah.
common to use those in
Absolutely.
Hebrew. Or the other end is basa, which means bummer. Okay, so
Yeah.
if you know that and you actually express these words to Israelis, you feel at home. They'll feel on the same page with you.
So easy, instant connection. Okay, so, what are some of the slang terms, again, that New Olim or Hebrew speakers have the hardest time understanding or putting into context? Like what doesn't maybe translate so well?
Okay, so we can mainly words like sentences, like the one Yoel mentioned, break a leg in Hebrew, in
Sure.
English. So let's say,
If we take just common expressions, manishma, okay, what's going on, okay, or what's up,
Right.
okay. Manishma could be, we used to listen to our kids and others. You can have an Israeli speaking to his friends. He'll ask him manishma, ma holech, what's going on, ma kore,
Ech holech.
what's up, ech holech. So the same thing, but people can spend a few minutes just asking the same question and answering sababa or hakol tov, everything is okay. So if you are into that, again, you'll become a total Israeli instantly.
You just bounce from one to the next. It's perfect.
Right.
And, fake it till you make it, in a sense. So, okay, how many of these phrases, these slang words, do you include in the course from the get-go?
we do it from day one, from the first book. And that's the time to tell you that now, during August and September, we have our summer sale. Summer sale on all the books we designed, because we understood that if people want to speak Hebrew like an Israeli, they just have to pick one of our digital books and be able to do it, because you can hear it, see it,
Wow.
and speak it.
And at each level, you have the slang particular to that level, okay? So you don't get stuck with the slang you learned at level Aleph. When you go Bet, Gimel, Dal, each one has more and more, sometimes more intricate, sometimes more complex slang, but it will help you feel an Israeli right away at that level.
Well, it sounds very, sababa and achla and very cool. Yoel, Orly, it is so great to have you back with us. Thank you so much again.
Thank you.
Now let's take a look at the weather forecast. Clear skies overhead tonight with lows averaging a milder 19 degrees Celsius or 66 Fahrenheit. Then tomorrow sees more clear and sunny skies with temperatures reaching a sweltering 35 Celsius or 95 degrees Fahrenheit. And finally on Saturday, we see much of the same with temperatures remaining in the high 20s to mid 30s. And that's all for today's news. For more updates from Israel and around the world, check out our website, ILTV.tv. You can also subscribe to our newsletter and join us on our streaming platform at ILTV+, and you can catch that on all of your devices. I'm Aaron Porras. Be well, have a wonderful weekend, and thank you so much for watching.
Hi everyone, it's Emmanuel Emmanuel Kadosh. I wanted to invite you all to subscribe to ILTV Plus, where you can find our daily news and updates about Israel. And not only that, but live feeds, entertainment, our kosher food show, and so much more. Needless to say, your subscription to ILTV Plus helps us grow and create more content while also supporting the state of Israel. Our app is available on all platforms and devices, so I'll see you guys there.